Welcome back to another episode of the TrueNAS Tech Talk podcast. On today's T3 podcast, we now have the launch of 25.04 behind us. We're going to check in on how that rollout's been going and what you should be aware of coming up next. We'll have some discussion about that most requested feature to date, which is application IP addressing, and how some of that functionality is expected to go live in the coming months. So, hey, Kris, we got Fangtooth, just came out on Tuesday. How's it working so far?
Yeah, it's working. It went live on Tuesday. We appreciate everyone being patient as things hit the CDN and all the bits got to where they needed to be. We're keeping an eye on the update numbers at this point, so they're tracking just slightly below where Electric Eel was at the same time during its release cycle. But that itself was a record pace, so that we're still way ahead of where Dragonfish and Cobia and some of the early releases were. So that's great. We're happy to see such a high adoption rate, and the feedback coming in has been excellent. We appreciate it. So far, most of the kind of NASy things are pretty boring. We're not seeing a lot of tickets or issues or anything really related to that. That's kind of business as usual, which is great. We're keeping an eye on that over the next couple days because we do try and update the software status page, usually about 5-7 days after the release has gone out. You just want to make sure you go through a weekend and give more people a chance to kick the tires, make sure nothing else surfaces before you go and decide where to move it. But I am expecting it to land in the tester early adopter, maybe even the general status here soon enough. So it's coming. It's looking good. I updated all my systems. I was even out of town this week and did it remotely. Like, I'm not afraid to do that. Everything came up and it was fine. So I'm happy.
Yeah, well, that's pretty good vote of confidence. I know I upgraded my system as soon as it came out. I was one of those people mashing the F5 button and going, okay, when's it hitting my CDN? Come on, bring it down. But I guess most of some of the feedback we've been getting early has been related to that new experimental instances framework. So again, just a reminder, please do read those release notes we put out before updating. We do try to put out a sort of a blog at the same time. Make sure that you know this is the right point for you to hit the upgrade button. So if you're running like a pretty heavy number of VMs on there, you'll either want to hang back or consider that you want to set aside a little bit of time afterwards to import those zvols and set up your VMs again. It's not a data loss scenario. Of course, you're not having to rebuild anything from scratch. It's just a matter of translating everything over from the old libvirt to the new Incus backend, because it is still running, QEMU and KVM under the hood. So everything's going to continue to work. It's just something that you have to take a little time to say, we're now having Incus manage it instead of libvirt.
Yeah,
But
that's generally pretty straightforward to do, but again, it takes time. It's not automatic. So just this is why we put out so much detail in the release notes. So please do read them. I know it's tempting just to hit upgrade and YOLO, see what
yeah,
happens.
exactly.
But
Well,
we
we'll
do
have
put
a
the
little bit.
information out there.
We'll have a little bit more on that later in the podcast. But one thing we just want to mention right now is that if you are one of those people who's doing the little command line modifications under there and, you're expecting them to persist, this is a constant theme that we hear. And there is a big warning that does come up when you SSH in or you open a shell prompt. It says the supported mechanisms for making configuration changes are the TrueNAS Web UI, the TrueNAS CLI, and the TrueNAS API exclusively. All others, including a direct SSH, are not supported, may result in undefined behavior, and may result in system failure. So I know a lot of people are saying, oh, that's just the boilerplate. It is a warning. It's there for a reason. I know a lot of the people who are jumping down on the command line, you're all the Kung Fu masters. But, fundamentally, TrueNAS might be based on Linux, but it is not a generic distro. So there's quite a lot of people who still aren't quite taking that to heart. We've even got tickets this past week. Somebody's asking, hey, how can I change the kernel? How can I enable apt? How can I replace all these system D things on a running system and expecting that to persist through upgrades and not have any sort of negative impact on any other component of it?
Yeah, that's a pretty fundamental misunderstanding of what an appliance is. So
Yeah.
again, we got to keep reminding folks, and we'll keep stressing this, and people will probably keep ignoring it because reading takes time. I get it, but at the same time, just there's a good way to do things and a bad way, and going and mucking around and customizing the base system and then getting upset when you upgrade and things don't persist. I mean, that's the wrong way.
Yeah, it's a fantastic tool for troubleshooting, for diagnostics, for gaining better insight if you're doing like mostly more read-only things, especially in ZFS. You want to try and do like zpool iostat and or dig out like your arc summary command line pieces and feed that into somewhere else to analyze it. That's fantastic. Just please make sure you understand what you're typing, especially when you're getting into like the deeper ZFS or ZDB commands. And if you're looking for these changes to persist, try to do any major changes like to your pool structure and those kind of things. Do those through the web UI, the CLI, or the API. That way, all of the TrueNAS middleware components are perfectly aware of them. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess a good example of doing this right, we had a user, they found a bug in their network driver. um I don't remember which exact model
Yeah,
it
I'd have to go
was.
look at the Jira ticket. I think he had to turn off some sort of offload
Probably was
functionality.
going
There
to
was,
say either it was
yeah.
either disabling like a TCP offload engine,
Mm-hmm.
or there's always the persistent folks who are using a real NIC on core and saying, hey, why can't I do it? The way to do these things, if there are little bits that you need to do every time, set up those post init commands in the UI at the particular stage that you need these things to happen. So that'll make sure that it runs properly after your system boot up. Those fixes do persist after upgrades until you manually remove them. So rather than trying to toss it into like an RC or a cron job in your shell, put it in the web UI through the post init commands in the shell scripts where we have a way to get to them. That's the
Mm-hmm.
place you want to do those things. Again, as you upgrade between versions, take a look and see maybe we've changed some behavior by default and you don't need that command any longer, but that is where you want to put those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just try and follow the best recommended practices here, and you'll have a much better experience as a result. Okay, jumping into our next topics, apps and IP addressing. So one of the most highest voted feature requests on the community forums ever since we started doing apps was to be able to allow apps to have better support for using specific IP addresses. So this is something, we've not been oblivious to. We've been paying attention. We absolutely wanted to do it. And we've actually had a solution for a little while now, which is going to allow apps to select specific IP addresses to bind to. So when you're doing forwarding and all that good stuff with apps out of the catalog, you'll have a drop down. You can say, I want to bind to this address and this address only, or this list of addresses. However, we've had to push off making this change live to the apps catalog since it effectively stops the migration of K3 Kubernetes-backed applications over to Docker. So in other words, if you're coming from Cobia, Dragonfish era, and you're still behind the curve and haven't rolled forward to Electric Eel, we did a lot of work in the Electric Eel release, which wasn't that long ago, to allow kind of that seamless migration of I have an application, I have Plex in Kubernetes from the official app catalog, or I have Jellyfin, or whatever application we had in the catalog at the time, to allow that to roll forward into Docker, and we copy all the config over and just kind of make it as seamless as possible. And that worked for the most part. Obviously, we found some edge cases we had to fix in the .1 and .2s, but that was pretty solid. However, this change is going to break that. That's going to make that ability to migrate from Kubernetes to the Docker engine no longer possible. So we've purposely kind of drug our feet on pushing out this app IP addressing support until we felt enough people had made the jump, gotten off of Dragonfish and into Electric Eel to make that a viable path. So we did set a date for this. This is looking to go live June 1st, which it's a month and a half away now. That's not too far away. That's going to go quick, everyone. We're talking like 45 days from the time of this recording. So what we're asking folks to do is pay attention to the date. If you're still on Dragonfish, which there's some, although the adoption rate for Electric Eel is massive, so I think 80% of the folks have already moved over. We're talking like the last 15-20% now who still need to make that jump. So if you've just been kind of dragging your feet and waiting for Electric Eel to mature, this is the time. You got a month and a half if you want to do that app migration. If you don't mind redeploying your applications, have at it. You can wait and upgrade at your leisure. And some folks will opt to do that. That's fine. Or if you weren't using apps, you don't care, that's fine too, right? But we just need to remind people that that's what's going to happen when the go live happens on June 1st, and we won't be taking tickets when people say, oh, I waited too long and my Plex didn't auto migrate and I'm annoyed because I have to manually reinstall it now. Now, another thing to note is if you're on Electric Eel, this was another reason we delayed a little bit. On Electric Eel, if you have existing applications installed, you may have noticed some apps, especially new ones which recently have landed in the catalog, already have the IP addressing enabled. So some of the newer ones added in the last couple months, you might even see the options today if you've started playing with those. But there's going to be a little bit of a hitch if you have to upgrade. So again, if you have that jellyfin and you want to move forward to the newer version, which supports IP addressing, you're going to see an error when you try and do the automatic upgrade to it. It's unavoidable. There's some migration support. We had to get in the base software to support this. Doesn't mean you can't go forward. You do have to basically just remove and re-add the application. You have to keep all your persistent host volumes, all that good stuff, so your apps config and data and all that stays intact. That's fine, but there's a little bit of a manual step you have to do to jump while on Electric Eel from old app which doesn't support IP addressing to new app which does. So that's the one hitch on Electric Eel. Not a deal breaker for most folks, should be pretty trivial to do, but it is something you have to take as a manual step. And then there's the kind of third bucket of Fangtooth users, which we've seen, thousands and thousands of people just a couple days already upgrade to that. So that bucket's growing quickly. And we figured by June 1st, we're already out with the .1. So that number is going to be even larger. Anybody on Fangtooth and later won't have to do anything. You're going to be able to click update after June 1st. Your apps will update. The IP addressing will just boom appear in the UI. Life is good. That was that migration change we had to put in the actual base software. So applications, for those who want to get into the technical details, we have a concept of there's an application version. For example, Plex has a version number, right? That's the version number Plex releases. And then we have a kind of an application chart version, and that's our internal versioning for the framework around the Plex application, right? We're making changes to our framework, which adds like the IP addressing. So that versioning is going to move forward, and then you'll be able to just see the new IP addressing show up in the UI. So it's an important change. Again, it's the most requested change we've had, the feature requests, since going back to last summer. But we're excited to get it out there. But again, we're going to take our time and push it at the right time. So we're trying to disrupt the least amount of people possible.
Yeah, the key understanding is that we wanted to make it clear you don't have to upgrade to Fangtooth by June 1st. I saw that a few times. I actually had to jump into a Reddit thread where people had that impression. Maybe that was on us. Maybe that was our miscommunication. So our bad if that's the case. But yeah, you can stay on Electric Eel. We're not looking to force anybody to jump to Fangtooth just a couple months into it. We want to make sure everybody's really comfortable, and we want to make sure that you can continue to use that version you want to use, with the exception of if you're still on Dragonfish and you're still running Kubernetes. This is kind of your cue to say it's time to bring yourself up with the rest of the Docker crew, come in there, or you're going to maybe redeploy your Kubernetes applications inside a sandbox, or hey, set up Kubernetes in an instance maybe.
Yeah, you got lots of options here. But again, choose your own adventure. We're just trying to get the word out there loud and clear so nobody's too surprised when June 1st comes and the change starts going live.
Yeah. Hey, while we're talking about upgrades, we talked about people upgrading to Fangtooth, but we do actually have some people who are already getting really excited about Goldeye, which is 25.10. It's coming in the fall. I actually had some people at a conference I was at, and just a little over a week ago, asking me, "Hey, what's coming next? We want to hear what's the inside baseball." So hopefully you guys are tuned in there. Sound off in the comments if you manage to see me, because I told you we'd tell you some insider things. So here it comes. So we've already got work started on that fall release. There is going to be a beta is planned of 25.10 for August. Now that goes by really, really quickly. So I mean, there's 4 months or so before we start that whole beta testing cycle on again. There are those of us running the nightlies and the masters. Hey, congratulations for being the really adventurous
You're
one.
brave. I salute you. That's good.
It's definitely not running on my primary machine, but I definitely have secondary machines. There might be a few of them in the background behind me somewhere that are running Goldeye. So the biggest feature, of course, from the community standpoint, is we're going to be aiming for a lot of maturation of that instances functionality as we make it ready for full enterprise support and deployments. It's going to move out of the experimental status it has in Fangtooth, and it will be pretty stable on the changes going forward. Specifically, we want to finish up the tooling and the middleware pieces around the data backup, the snapshots, and some migration capabilities. We're also expecting to include some options for being able to both import VMs and export them from other popular formats, whether that's VMDKs, VDIs, QCOWs, OVAs, things like that. So we want you to be able to bring your machines in seamlessly and then export them out seamlessly. We want it to just be more of a standard virtualization platform.
That's going to make life easier for folks, like bringing that Home Assistant OS image over, and anything where it's already got a published, raw or QCOW image, you can just go in the UI and click upload and let it go.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen a few of you having a little bit of fun at our expense with some memes about, how do you back up instances right now? And that's the fun part. You don't. And I'm like, well, that's okay. A little bit of a sore point, but yeah, we're going to have to just hold on to that one. And that's part of the reason we're, making sure to say, hey, you don't have to go to Fangtooth if you want to stay on Electric Eel right now and use that existing VM configuration. But outside of that instances front, we're going to be looking at other important functionality for the community side. So we're looking to be supporting secure boot. That's been a long time waiting. I know the folks that have systems they don't want to disable it on. You're going to hopefully have your secure boot support going forward. Additionally, we're looking to bring NVMe over TCP support into the product directory or product directly. So this is like the next gen of block storage. So it's faster than iSCSI. We're hoping for lower latency, some better quality of life improvements on it. We're going to have longer queue depths in there.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it's just
Just modern.
it's a modern protocol. We're not emulating the legacy SCSI commands over the TCP connections. So it'll
Yeah.
be visible to all of your connected client devices as if they were NVMe. They'll be able to treat them that way. It'll be a nice overall performance improvement there.
I had to go look it up before the show, Kris, because I was curious as we are working on the notes here. SCSI protocol is 40 years old, 40 years plus at this point, right?
Oh,
To give you
wow.
a rough idea where that came from, iSCSI itself, 20 plus years. So it's time. It's good. It's always
So
nice to get something a little more modern and shiny that's optimized for the hardware of today and not for 1998.
we're
This is good.
we're using a 20-year-old software to emulate 40-year-old software here.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, yeah, we'll try and get ourselves into the 21st century.
Yep. No, this is
Get
a
up
good
there.
upgrade. Again, it's one of those things. It's not like it's been out a super long time. VMware's added support for it in recent years, but we haven't seen a lot of demand until more recently, where people are like, I should be using NVMe over TCP instead of iSCSI because I'm seeing that there's some performance wins and all that good
Yeah.
stuff. So we're happy to finally get that in the product. That's been one of those ones on my wish list for a little while now.
Yeah, and that'll be a nice little ad for those who are looking to really, push the envelope. Those of you who are getting, your 40 gig kind of connectivity is starting to filter down into the user space, which is great. I'm, get a little bit of jealous of those of you who have a 40 gig setup at home. I'm not quite there yet. But we're also giving the update system a little bit of an overhaul. So going forward, you won't be worrying about, the train in the UI as before you've had to select the train. Are you running Dragonfish? Are you running Electric Eel? Are you running Fangtooth? We're going to change it more to selecting the update channel, which is what we do on our software status page. So it correlates there. You've got testers, early adopters, generals, conservative, etc. Once you set this on your TrueNAS installation, it's going to automatically track the version that moves into that status, and you'll be prompted to update at that time. So it means less guesswork for you. You'll need to pay less attention to that software status pages closely when you go there to know when the right time to click update is. You'll just be able to select, hey, I feel like this is, in my example, I'd say this is my home production system. I want to be conservative on that. That's got my personal photo backups on there. That's where I do the targeted backups of my software. I'm going to put that on the conservative channel. And I'm going to get the updates as we at TrueNAS move them down to say they're suitable for this type of user. Maybe I've got another one that I say, this is my little test machine. I'm going to put that on the tester train. So, hey, when, Goldeye .1 comes out and it's just hit the testers, well, then that machine will automatically pull it down. But my stable conservative one, it might still be sitting back saying, no, actually, I'm waiting on Fangtooth. I'm
Yeah.
going to wait till Goldeye filters down to there.
Yeah, I run my two primary systems here, the backup and then the real primary. So we'll have a general, and then I usually use like early adopter on the backup system because it's mostly a replication target with a handful of containers on it, and that's one I can fool around with. But that's absolutely an awesome feature and a long time coming. The whole trains idea is just confusing to some folks, and just one of those things we've had in FreeNAS since the early days. It's time to clean it up, and make it feel a little more modern.
Yeah, I'm trying to modernize it and simplify it a little bit. And it has been an ask from a couple folks. So hopefully, if you've been asking for this, you'll be happy when you get that. There are a couple more improvements that we're not quite ready to talk about yet. We'll probably shed some more light onto them as we get closer to confirming that we'll be able to put them in a beta release or an RC
Mhm.
or something. But there is more coming, so make sure you stay tuned.
Yeah, there's going to be some fun stuff to talk about this summer. Like I said, I'm itching to do so, but I gotta wait. We gotta do it at the right time.
We can only say so much at the right point, even on our own podcast, right,
That's
Kris?
right. That's right. Okay, well, hey, in the lighthearted section of this week's podcast, listening to the T3 podcast can make you smarter, more hireable, and better looking. Results not guaranteed. But one of the things I wanted to call out for a little bit of fun here, a little anecdotal evidence that the T3 podcast is good for your career as well as your health and general attractiveness. We're both pleased to see one of our prolific question askers, Paul, just started a new job here at TrueNAS this week as a sales engineer.
Hey,
Congratulations, Paul.
congrats, Paul.
You asked enough questions, we had to hire you to get him to stop. I kid.
What
But seriously,
was he has no longer needs to ask them to T3 at TrueNAS.com. He just asks us internally on our Slack channel, which is great. We
yeah,
love seeing that.
he can go direct now. That's great. But no, seriously, an awesome way to build up your own storage credentials, EFS, and TrueNAS knowledge directly, which led to a new career for Paul. We're glad to have you on board. And in short time, maybe you'll be the one we're asking you questions of in the future. But anyway, no, congrats, welcome on board. And that was just a fun little thing to see. Like, oh, I recognize that name. Didn't he just send a question into the podcast? And awesome.
Exactly. I
Okay.
saw that.
Speaking of listener questions, we have a one from Mark today, which is a little long, so I'm going to try and read it and maybe summarize on the fly, so bear with me a little bit here. Mark writes in to say, hey, great job on the YouTube series podcast. I have an issue that probably isn't that interesting, but it is to me. I thought it's interesting. That's why I'm putting it on the show here. It's one of those weird edge cases, but you're probably not the only one. So he mentions he has a couple boxes that he'd upgraded from core to scale a few months ago, and he realized that one of the GIDs, which was a holdover from a Ready NAS back in 2007, oh, that's interesting history there. He said Netgear back then recommended to start with a UID GID range of 100 and work up, and he attached some screenshots and some supporting information. He said this worked great initially on core, but when he upgraded to scale, the upgrade process added a bunch of new built-in users and associated groups, one of which happened to use the same GID. Whoops, that is the risk of using that reserved range, which you're lucky it didn't hit you on core because we actually had the same reserved range there, but you just got fortunate that we didn't end up using that particular UID. I don't recall which one it was. He said the upgrade didn't handle it well, but it didn't really gripe either, so he didn't find out until he went into operation, I assume, and had something that conflicted. So he said, as it created a new user ID and group ID at the same number, it assigned the user to a primary group, which had the duplicate old GID. So he had to go do some manual fooling around to get it to clean up, it looks like, and change the primary group to no group, which, oh, it happened to be system time sync. Interesting. Okay. So that was the culprit here in this case. So let's see. He mentions that he had to go change it via the shell. He said except user mod was locked out. Apparently, it's unable to open the config database. That is true. We store the UID GIDs in the TrueNAS config. That's very intentional. We're not doing it on the Unix side because we want you to be able to download your config, reinstall the boot device and upload and have all your users come back. You don't want to have to recreate all those. So that's the correct way to do it. So he had some thoughts on, is there a better way to handle this on upgrade, if there's a duplicate, etc., or give us a warning page on the upgrade so we know ahead of time if something's going to happen or if there's a new UID being added. So we had thought about that or talked about it, but this is a rather infrequent edge case. Again, that whole below 1,000 being reserved, that's been in the product. As a matter of fact, this came up in a different context internally recently. I think we talked about in FreeBSD, that's been there for 15 years plus. Linux now we're going on 8 years, or Debian's 12 years. That's what it was. Debian, that's been the recommendation for almost 12 years now. And there was one Linux left, a holdout, Red Hat, which didn't make the change until 2017. So now we're talking 8 years ago, where everyone has more or less stepped back and say, okay, anything under 1,000 is reserved for the system and system services. Do not use those UID GID ranges. We've seen this come up only a couple times that I can recall in the past decade. One particular instance, somebody had some really legacy like AIX Solaris boxes and was still using those. We start our UIDs at 100 since we did that back in 1999. I'm like, yeah, the world's moved on. Sorry. It's time to get right.
Yeah. I
Um,
guess the question is, he says, how do we, how do we go forward on this? He says, is there any way to fix this, to assign this UID's primary group back to GID 101? He says, I would reinstall, but uploading that
yeah,
config file would probably break it again. And it likely would, because as you said, Kris, we back up those UID GIDs as
we
part of that
absolutely
config
do.
file.
And the short answer is no. I don't see any path where we go and we relax that restriction back to 100 and above being the range you can use on the user side. That's just, again, the industry and the world has moved on. Linux, Unix, FreeBSD, apart from the oldest of the oldest Unixes, have all standardized on this idea of UIDs should begin at 1,000 and move up. UIDs and GIDs should both. So I'm not really seeing us doing much on the TrueNAS side to go fix this. And again, I've only seen this in the wild. Maybe you're the fourth person in a decade I've run into where somebody had a really low UID that they were using. So it's probably an edge enough case. We're not going to go codify something and build something into the software to detect it because it's so rare. We're talking every few years that we hear about it. So probably not going to happen, but it is something I wanted to address your question here in case you happen to be one of those other folks who says, oh, I also did an import from a ReadyNAS back in 2007 or something really ancient, and maybe you're affected by this. I'm just going to put the word out there. Go check your config, double check your UID ranges, make sure everything's good. We do have, I checked not too long ago, I think there's like 35 UID GIDs we use within that 100 to 1000 range for different services like apps, for example. That's one. There's one for time daemons. There's a handful for different services on the storage side as well. So we have legitimate reason to need to keep that range reserved, and it changes on different upgrades too. Like I said, new services get dropped in. So anyway, all that to say, he was able to get his system fixed up. He said, again, thanks and great job on Fangtooth. I guess he's already upgraded. He said he had a few issues here and there. He wrote up a couple of them. A couple of them went away on reboots, so that was not a big deal. That's good to hear. He said he's been exercising the VMs a lot. That's cool. He said he's tried about 15 distros out, all but one, MX Linux, which I am not familiar with that one at all, loaded properly. So, okay, that sounds good. I can be happy with that, although I'm curious. I'm going to have to go see what MX Linux is now. He said he's also using TrueNAS Core and Scale as VMs, which he used to diagnose the UID GID thing when he was troubleshooting it. So that's cool. And then he said after a week or so, he's also been playing with the Mac VLAN NIC type. He was able to get some game servers up. So he's like, that tells me that the VM is working real well for real time things. That's great. Well, that's good to hear. He says that means I probably won't have to go to XCP-ng or Proxmox, which is something he was hoping he could avoid. And he said, sounds like it looks like he now can. Well, awesome. That's good to hear, Mark. And I assume because the question came in before the Fangtooth 0 went out, this must have all been done on the beta and RC. So I'm hopeful if anybody's doing the same on the 0 now, they'll have an even better experience. So great feedback. Appreciate it, Mark. Again, somewhat uncommon thing you ran into, but there's a record of it now in the podcast history in case anyone else finds themselves in this situation down the road.
Exactly. Well, we'll try to see if I can, tag me in on the forums. I'll come in and look at that. Maybe we can figure out a way to preserve the majority of your config somehow, your SMB settings. It really depends on how much of a complicated system you got going on there. We might be able to find something where we can give you a little bit of assistance with
Yeah.
trying to sort out that UID problem.
In the
It's
past, it's mostly been a script running fine that goes and just reapplies the new UID GIDs to whatever the new numbers are you picked in the appropriate range. But it's one time. Once it's done, and then you can forget about it. You basically cleaned up 20 years of being behind the curve.
yeah. Well, it did, like you said, it came from a ReadyNAS in 2007, so that's pretty very early days of FreeNAS, certainly. So I mean, it was glad to have you come on board that soon.
Yeah, and thank you for being with us that long. That's awesome. That's one of the earliest histories I've heard of somebody, I guess, with a continual setup from that time. That's great.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thanks for the question, Mark, and thanks again to everybody for tuning in for one more week of the TrueNAS Tech Talk podcast. As always, if you have a question, please feel free to submit it in to t3@truenas.com. You can, of course, drop us a message in the comment section below. And don't forget to do the usual YouTube things. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to our channel, keep listening to T3 to stay on top of all the latest TrueNAS tech tips and tech topics, and we will see you next time.